And then Aunt Miriam and your uncle Ira realised they were trapped. They'd helped so many people escape, but now it looked like the Grendel would capture them, and they would never be able to come home again. Leona and Marco gasped, sat up in their beds. Their eyes were wide and mouths open. Little Marco looked as if he might cry, so Tamara quickly continued the tale. They were worried. The orcs had come down from Mora's Rock, which they'd stolen from the Freeborn, interrupted Lenora, nodding wisely despite her years. Which they had stolen from the Freeborn, yes. They'd come down in force, knowing that Aunt Mira and Uncle Ira were in the area. The governor had put a rich price on their heads, dead or alive. Even if they could avoid the patrons until dawn, they'd never be able to get across the border, and once the sun rose, it would be too late. So they hid in the trees and tried to come up with a plan that would lead them to safety. "Are they going to be all right, ma'am?" asked Mark in a tiny voice. He was actually sniffling a little now, even though he already knew that his beloved aunt and her husband had not in fact been captured by the Grendel. Tamara patted him on the hand as she continued. And then there was this incredible noise of shouting and drums. Aunt Mira and Uncle Ira crept forward and saw a great crowd of Freeborn just on the other side of the border, arguing with the Grendel guards, creating the most outrageous hullabaloo. I think some of them had fire pots and drums. They were swirling them about and dancing, and made the wicked Grendel orcs even more angry and confused. Tamara leant forward conspicuously and dropped her voice to almost a whisper. And then, at the exact moment, who would appear out of the shadows next to your aunt and uncle but a lone Navarre, wearing the darkness like it was a cloak? His tattoos crimson as blood, and his eyes twinkling with cleverness and determination. He was wearing a scarf that had been given to his ancestors by Emperor Hazar himself. He put his finger to his lips. She put her own fingers to her lips, and the two children fell silent themselves, still as statues. And he said, "I will get you out of here, even if I have to die doing it." He then beckoned to them to follow him, and follow him they did. He led your aunt and uncle through the darkness. I heard that at one point they passed so close to the Grendel patrol that they could have reached out and tweaked their ears if they wanted to. But the orcs did not see them, not one of them. They were so distracted by the Freeborn crowd, they did not spot a thing. And so your aunt and uncle crossed into Segura and followed the Navarre and all the Freeborn back to the Sentinel Gate. By the time the foolish Grendel realized what had happened, it was too late. They were safe. Marco and Lenora cheered and hugged each other, beaming with relief. And of course, there is a lesson here, Tamara continued, once their jubilance had died down a little. "Ma'am," Lenora, in a long-suffering voice of a 12-year-old girl who thought herself too old for stories with lessons. Tamara ignored her. "The Navari did not have to come to Faraz and risk his life to save your aunt and uncle. He could have stayed in the northern woods, glaring at the Valorn, but he didn't. He accompanied the Freeborn into danger and snuck through the woods while his friends created an incredible distraction. He saved Aunt Mira and Uncle Ira. Working together, the Grendel were no match for the Freeborn and Navarre. The lesson is that the Empire will always defeat its enemies as long as the bonds of friendship are strong. As long as we remember that what happens in the Brass Coast matters to the Navarre, and what happens to the Navarre matters to the Freeborn. As long as we remember our differences don't separate us, they make us stronger." She hugged the two children, settling them down, kissing each of them on the forehead and snuffing the candle. The door shut. She heard them whisper excitedly, retelling the tale, embroidering it with their own details as they did so, and she smiled. Overview. In winter 383, the Freeborn National Assembly called for the people of Faraz to flee the territory. While they still hold out hope of one day eventually returning, the day could be years away, depending on what happens with the peace treaty. Thus, with a heavy heart, they called on the people of Faraz to accept the inevitable, to gather their belongings and to flee the territory. The general treaty allowed citizens in the two ceded regions to leave if they wished, providing they did so before the start of the spring equinox. With the encouragement of the assembly, a steady stream of people leaving the area soon turned into a flood. Not everyone made it out in time, however. Worse, those freeborn in the Khazar Straits, Fontagreta and Orensey were not so fortunate. Having already been conquered by the Grendel, they were not permitted to leave at all. As a result, a plan was formed for the Empire's fleets and military units to cooperate to evacuate this territory. The Imperial ships could use the relevant opening coastline on eastern Faroz, with military units would slip in under the cover of darkness across the long land border with Segura and Madruga. Together, they would smuggle the freeborn out from under the nose of the oppressive Grendel governor Raab. A resounding triumph. Nearly 200 fleets and almost half the number of military units assisted in the evacuation of Faroz. The evacuation was a complete success. Only a handful of freeborn families remain in Faroz. Nobody knows the waters of Faroz like the freeborn, and the swift corsair ships were able to lead the Grendel a merry dance as they navigated their way through the territory waters. As might be expected, more than half of the vast armada of assembled fleets were from the Brass Coast, and there is huge pride across the coast as it becomes clear that the number of freeborn fleets and their dedication means they could have pulled this off by themselves. Every nation sent ships, however, with Navarre, Wintermark, and the Lead providing nearly 6 fleets between them. The freeborn also called in their allies, with the Commonwealth sending ships and soldiers to join the expedition to help the freeborn flee the despicable rule of Lord Raab. Likewise, a daring quest into the Afar Hills saw 2 key Zemrist islanders rescued from the Orc garrison at Mora's Rock, allowing them to rally their relatives to the cause. Several of the Zemrist islanders have already spent months helping the freeborn get out of Faroz, and their expertise provided very valuable. The captains of the fleets worked tirelessly to ferry families and their belongings north to Madruga. It was a coordinated effort with the captains passing on information to each other where they had no more room to take on passengers, and many ships making the journey several times before everyone dwelling on the coast was freed. Even the corsairs that abandoned their normal rivalry, everyone understood that this expedition needed all hands on deck. It is an impressive show of force and unity, and more than one corsair is quick to point something out. If their empire had this many fleets in support of the freeborn storm, they might still be contesting the Bay of Khazar. While the coast of Faroz was wealthy and populous, the people concentrated at the coastal towns and ports. The highlanders regions of Morajas and Afajas are much more challenging prospect. There were far fewer people to be rescued here, but they were much harder to reach, requiring scores of military units to slip past Grendel patrols to locate families wishing to leave. This time it was the Imperial Orcs and Dawn that provided the bulk of the force needing to ensure success. In fact, a quarter of the military units here are Imperial Orcs. One freeborn observer wondered if the entire nation was helping this escape. Even so, this is a close thing. The Brass Coast may have a vast armada of small fleets. They have only a fraction of the number of military units. Thus, the support of the Empire's allies is absolutely crucial. The additional strength provided by the Commonwealth soldiers was enough to tip the land operation from success to major victory. Without their help, far fewer would have made it out. There were a few run-ins with Orcs of the Broken Shore during the action, but this never came to blows, however. The Grendel were easily dealt with by those leaving the territory paying tolls, fees, and other necessary payments. The instinctive corruption of the Grendel with every Orc out for themselves had served them poorly in Faroz, allowing imperial bribery to cover what was going on for weeks. By the time Raab realised the scale of what was occurring and understood how it was happening, it was too late for him to order any effective resistance. Raab's response. Governor Raab is furious and regards the action as betrayal. Oran has been closed to Imperial ships. Imperial military units and fleets based in Faroz will experience territory penalty going forward. He is having to ship in large numbers of slaves to replace the lost workers and is facing reunion costs as a result. With the realization of what happened finally dawns on him, Governor Raab is by all accounts apoplectic with fury. Those engaged in the rescue pass on constantly growing rumours of the governor's rage, with lurid tales of him executing underlings in explosions of rage at everyone around him. It's impossible to be sure quite what the truth of those stories is, but what is in no doubt is that he is seething. His first response is to shut the port of Oran, given orders that no Imperial ship is to be permitted to dock there. It's questionable what impact that will have. Not many fleet captains were all that keen to trade with the Grendel anyway. Arguably, the act is mostly symbolic, but whatever the case, the port is now closed to Imperial vessels. What follows is more serious, with orders to close the border with the Brass Coast following an instruction from the Grendel patrols to hunt for and harass any Imperial military units or fleets active in the area. As a result of their efforts, life has become immeasurably harder for any freeborn fleet or military unit that is based in Faroz. From this point on, Imperial resources in Faroz will suffer a 50% penalty to their production for being in a conquered territory, including manor units and fleets. Raab's forces are actively hunting freeborn soldiers and ships in Faraz and harassing them right up to the very edge of what peace treaty allows when they find them. To try and save the situation, Raab has given instruction for large numbers of slaves to be purchased from the market in Dutrang and shipped to Faraz. The costs involved are immense. Where Raab once hoped to tax the people of Faraz for every ring he could squeeze from them, he is now forced to buy slaves to replace the owners and workers in farms, herb gardens, parlours, and businesses across the territory. The governor and his backers are frantically trying to save the situation and do what they can to turn profit from Faraz. But it remains to be seen if he will survive this debacle. The Grendel are not kind to those who fall to the Empire's wills. Due to the sudden deterioration of relations, any opportunity involving trade with the Grendel in Faraz that has not already been completed are immediately ended. The borders have been largely closed, with only a few independent merchants such as Farad'n allowing to cross them. The majority of the inhabitants of the Freeborn have fled. It is very unlikely that there will be new opportunities for further interaction with Raab in the short term. The Grendel's response. The Grendel High Council does not yet believe the Empire has renounced on the treaty. To save face, they've stated that the rescue of people from Faraz represents all the slaves the Grendel promised to release to the Empire under the terms of the treaty. They have also demanded the Imperial Fleet Master provide them with 6 wains of weirwood per the agreement of the Spring Equinox 384. Word soon reaches the Empire that Raab has pleaded with the Grendel High Court to send their armies north to punish the Empire for breaking the peace treaty. Although he is forced to accept that the Freeborn were permitted to leave the ceded region, he argues the extraction of citizens from the region the Grendel had conquered is a violation of the spirit of the treaty. By all accounts, his claims are largely rebuffed. The treaty doesn't say the Empire can't remove their people from the conquered region, and even the Grendel don't view the people conquered as slaves, so technically nothing has been stolen. While the Grendel could indeed have made a case that the Empire have broken the spirit of the treaty, it seems they are not yet ready to renounce it. Between the Imperial Fleet Master, Irizo I Avea I Erego, and Speaker Morona, agree on 6 wains of weirwood as compensation for the 4 individuals assaulted during the Winter Summit YE 383. The payment settles the matter, and it cannot be raised again by either part. The weirwood is to be paid at the Summer Solstice 384. Contract between the Grendel and the Imperial Fleet Master. However, the High Court do issue 2 announcements. The first is they will provide no more slaves to the Empire to be freed. The people taken from Faraz represent the 1 slave a day that they were obliged to provide to the Empire. In the opinion of the High Council, the requirement has been discharged in full, and there will be no more slaves being released. Given that they were due to provide another 500 or so slaves, whereas the evacuation of Faraz has saved tens of thousands from the Grendel rule, this seems little more than a face-saving gesture on their part. Whether the Empire wants to push this issue with them or not is a matter for official ambassadors. On the matter of the second announcement, points out that the Council are still waiting to receive the 6 wains of weirwood that were agreed at the Spring Equinox 384. These were due to be supplied by the Imperial Fleet Master under the terms of the agreement, and they have not yet been forthcoming. The High Council makes clear that the Empire will not be in breach of the agreement until the end of the summer solstice, but if the wains are not forthcoming by then they will be considered a violation of the peace treaty. They are at pains to point out that any nation that deals with the Grendel, even ones as infamously dubious as the Empire, will be held to the terms of their agreement, or else face the consequences. Fidelity, the idea of keeping your word and keeping faith with those around you, is one of the most important of all the 7 virtues, at least in the eyes of the Grendel. The High Council intend to send representatives to the forthcoming summit at Anvil to ensure the fines they are due are received and forthcoming, and to discuss other business with the Empire. Indeed, it's expected to arrive on Saturday at a time to be confirmed and will be accompanied by Speaker Mora. They have indicated they wish to discuss the matter with the Imperial Fleet Master as well as others. The Brass Coast response. The majority of those who have been successfully evacuated from Faraz have chosen to settle in Madruga, closely followed by Segura. Taxation from Madruga will increase by 30 thrones and Segura by 20 after the autumn equinox of 384. Any characters with a personal resource in Faraz can take a new resource without paying 2 crowns to change resources, up to spring equinox 385. The people of Faraz have brought everything they can carry with them. They arrive in Segura and Madruga with not inconsolable wealth in tow, ready to start a new life over. The people of Feroz have brought everything they can carry with them. They arrived in Segura and Madruga with not an inconsolable wealth in tow, ready to start a new life over. Most are sad to leave Feroz, but the freeborn are not marchers. What matters is liberty, not land. The Brass Coast is an idea that will survive the loss of territory, provided the people can live prosperously and freely. While the freeborn often disapprove of charity, they take the opposite approach with family, and those evacuees who have kin in Madruga and Segura are welcome with open arms. A concerted effort is made to provide resources to support those people who are striving to make a new life outside of Feroz. To help them re-establish themselves as quickly as possible for the next year, any character who is abandoning a personal resource in Feroz can take a new resource of their choosing in Madruga or Segura without having to pay the 2 crown cost. The benefit ends just before the spring equinox 385. In addition, the influx of prosperous new inhabitants to the 2 territories provide a significant boost to the taxation following the imperial treasury. The tax returns from the territory of Segura and Madruga increase by 20 and 30 thrones each season, respectively. Segura. Every herb garden in Segura that engages with the newcomers will be upgraded by 1 rank at the start of the autumn equinox 384. Tari I Consenza I Guerrera proposes the construction of the Veraldi Greenhouse, a conservatory designed to boost the production of herbs in Segura. The glass house would require 20 wains of weirwood and 20 thrones and take 3 months to complete. It would provide 60 herbs split between the herb garden and families in the territory and re-establish the vizier of the incandescent satchel. The opportunity will last until the end of summer solstice 385. Those families who choose to settle in Segura are quick to make a new life for themselves. They bustle towards towns of Adzura, Sobal, and Sheravedo and expand quickly, aided by the Zemarist islanders. The empty space around the towns, especially given the recent invasion, has meant that any who wish to live in and around the towns of Segura are soon able to find a home readily. One of the groups evacuated from Morajas is made up of workers from the spice gardens and offices of the vizier of the Inclandine Satchel. These workers have considerable experience in cultivating herbs, and they have brought with them various cuttings that have recovered from the captured spice gardens. They are keen to put these to good use in their new home. As a result of the boundary, every herb garden in Segura will be upgraded by 1 rank at the start of the autumn equinox 384. To receive this benefit, herb garden owners will need to email us before the start of the next event to indicate which herb production they wish to boost. Characters who don't have a herb garden in Segura at present may still benefit from this opportunity if they change their resource before the start of the next summit. In addition, Tarek I Consenza I Guerrera, formerly one of the head gardeners at the Spice Gardens, has a proposition to construct a new conservatory in the Iron Plains, named the Veranda Glasshouse. The conservatory would be ideal for growing herbs from seeds with a view to transplant the budding plants to herb gardens and farms across the territory. Tariq's plan is an opportunity to take advantage of the considerable number of experts settling in Segura, and his plan requires 20 wains of weirwood. Unfortunately, the design needs a lot of very expensive green glass, so the commission would need 20 thrones to complete. The glass house would need a commissioning slot that could be built by the Imperial Senate or by any title able to commission a great work. Once complete, it will provide 60 random herbs each session, with 30 split between the herb garden and the territories, and 30 split between the farmers. In addition, the support of the School of Sangura Bloom in Atalan, the glass house could serve as a new office for the vizier, re-establishing the imperial title and allowing the holder to resume purchase of herbs from across the region. Madruga. The viners of Feroz are seeking to establish new vineyards in Madruga. The Freeborn Assembly can use a single judgment to name 6 freeborn characters who own businesses in Madruga to receive a free upgrade to their resource. A consortium of business owners have fled from Fortenegra to Madruga. They are looking to establish new vineyards in the Socorro Plains and the Great Grasses. They don't need any additional help to establish the new wine estate, but they are aware that their presence will provide a significant boost to the Paradors and other businesses which are spread through the territory. Mindful of the significant help that they have just received and keen to repay the generosity, they have asked the Freeborn Assembly to pass a judgment naming 6 representatives of the families that did the most to help with the evacuation efforts. The business owners plan to purchase essential materials and sales of their new wines to those named in the judgment. As a result, the first 6 freeborn characters singled out by the Freeborn Assembly who have businesses in Madruga will receive a free upgrade to their resource. Characters who don't have a business in Madruga at present may still benefit from this opportunity if they change their resource before the start of the next summit. The remainder, who have arrived in Madruga from Faraz, have dispersed through the territory. Xeroc is always heaving with people, and the newcomers have largely been absorbed into the great city of Sales without great impact. But 3 largest towns in Madruga, Kavlos, Quasar, and Atalana, are now bursting at the seams as the newcomers look for places to put down new roots. As a result, there is an opportunity to capitalise on the new arrival of these newcomers in these 3 towns. Atalaya. An opportunity exists to rebuild the Atalayan shipyard to support fleets based in Madruga. Rebuilding the shipyard would cost 10 wains of weirwood, 20 wains of white granite, and 60 crowns, and take 3 months to construct, and have an upkeep of 5 thrones. Once completed, it would reduce the cost of upgrading fleets based out of Madruga by 1 weirwood. The Grendel could not legitimately claim the dock breached the treaty, but they would be aware of the threat the shipyard poses. The benefits of the shipyard would be lost once a Brass Coast reclaimed Faraz. The opportunity will last until the end of the spring equinox 385. Atalaya is the oldest settlement on the Brass Coast, and it remains a place of pilgrimage for many freeborn followers of the Way. But its significance took a heavy blow when the Grendel sacked the port and destroyed the nearby shipyards. Now, with so many skilled ships from Faraz settling here, there is a chance to begin restoring the pride and prosperity of the settlement. Under the terms of the recent treaty with the Grendel, the Empire are not permitted to build any new shipyards or raise any navy in the Bay of Khazar. However, nothing would prohibit them from expanding the existing dock facility provided they were only used to benefit fleets. The massive seawall constructed by the Senator of Savos remains, and would still require 10 wains of weirwood, 20 wains of white granite, and 60 crowns to rebuild the destroyed shipyard. It would need a commission slot, but it could be authorised by the Imperial Senate or any title with the authority to build a shipyard. Once complete, the facility would be perfect for building and upgrading Imperial fleets, allowing any freeborn fleet based out of Madruga to be upgraded each season for 1 less weirwood than it usually requires. In addition, like the proposed expansion of the docks at Elos, the dock could be quickly and cheaply expanded later to include a fully functioning shipyard. Such an expansion would only require 10 wains of white granite, 10 wains of weirwood, and 20 crowns. While it would take 3 months to complete, the existing facility would be good enough to start work on a navy the same time as the shipyard being built, saving precious time. The benefit would last for long as the arrivals continue to live in Madruga. Once the Brass Coast reclaims Faraz, many of the new arrivals would look to return home. If that happened, the shipyard would no longer have enough manpower to reduce the upgrade costs for Madrugan fleets. At that point, the only benefit would be to convert them into regular shipyards described above. Calvos. An opportunity exists to build a school of navy warfare at Kavos. Creating the folly would cost 10 wains of white granite, 15 wains of weirwood, 10 wains of mithril, and 70 crowns, take 6 months to construct, and have an upkeep of 5 thrones. The school would allow the Empire to study and research the techniques of naval warfare, allowing them to develop improved navies better able to face the Grendel. This opportunity will last until the end of the spring equinox 385. Calvos is the final resting place of the Kraken Bane, a legendary vessel captained by the exemplar Zemerus, and home to the Seminary of Zemerus, a school where students come to study prosperity. Pilgrims travel from all over the Empire to visit the site, to look upon the Bane, and to study the texts shown in the seminary. The Sumerians consider Zemerus to be a paragon, not an exemplar, and they provide white granite to build a seminar on the condition that it would be open to visitors who came to study the way. Zemerus' life is an inspiration to all who follow the path of prosperity, but she is also an inspiration to any who want to follow her in her footsteps and face the Grendel at sea. Seminary is filled with books about Zemerus' life, including several texts describing naval battles where the Kraken Bane defeated Grendel pirate vessels in vivid detail. When people fled Faraz, many of those who looked to Zemerus have chosen to settle here, swelling the ranks of the faithful and creating a unique opportunity to build a school of naval warfare. The school will require 10 wains of white granite, 15 wains of weirwood, 10 wains of mithril, and 70 crowns, and take 6 months to construct and have an upkeep of the imperial treasury of 5 thrones. It would require a commission slot and could only be authorized by the Imperial Senate or by any title with the authority to commission a folly. The school is similar to the School of Shipbuilding and originally proposed for Sirach by Frederick de Salvos, but is more limited in its scope, focusing purely on teaching and research, at least for now. The opportunity to create the school will be available until the end of spring equinox 385. The school would provide no direct economic benefit, but it would allow the freeborn to begin studying naval warfare, allowing them to disseminate techniques across the Brass Coast and the Empire. Once complete, the research at the school would present 3 possible qualities that new imperial navies might build with. They would invite the fleet owners of the Brass Coast to vote on which quality they felt most important. Whichever quality won would become the one focus on their research. The civil service prognators believe it would take a year to develop the new quality, at which point the freeborn could vote on which project to begin next. Research would present a new quality to consider alongside the 2 previous rejected options. The Summary are not currently prepared to provide funding or support for the school, but several of their visiting priests have pointed out that if the Empire were prepared to share the new naval technique they learned with the Samar, then it would be very well received by their fellow adherers to the way. The Samar have 2 navies, but they are outclassed by the Assaveans in much the same way the Empire struggles to compete with the Grendel navies. Redressing that balance would be a huge boost to diplomatic relations with the Samar. Quasar. An opportunity exists to build a parador of sand and salt in Quasar. Creating the ministry would cost 15 wains of mithril and 5 wains of weirwood, 5 wains of white granite, 50 crowns, and take 3 months to construct. The parador would need to be a national boss position appointed by the tally of the votes. It would act as a ministry, allowing the Hakima of sand and salt to purchase mana crystals. The Parador of Sand and Salt could be expanded into the College of Magic at any point with a significantly reduced upkeep cost. The opportunity will last until the end of the spring equinox 385. The Towers of Quasar are known as gathering places for Hakima and from across the Brass Coast. There are yearly councils that meet here every midsummer to share knowledge and gossip. As a result, most of the Hakima who have fled Faraz have come here, along with many families who have an interest in autumn magic. Now the streets are permanently filled with magicians discussing their affairs. Thus, Ishla Iego proposes to construct the Parador of Salt and Sand, a vast Parador of Sand and Salt, a vast meeting house where the Hakima could discuss their business together and where visitors could find lodgings. Constructing the Parador would create a new imperial title, the Hakima of Sand and Salt, who would be able to purchase mana crystals while overseeing the day-to-day running of the Parador. Cratery would cost 15 wains of mithril and 5 wains of weirwood, 5 wains of white granite, 50 crowns, and take 3 months to construct. It would require a commission slot and could be authorized by the Imperial Senate or by an imperial title able to commission a ministry. Once completed, it would create a new imperial title, the Hakima of Sand and Salt. This would have to be a national boss position appointed by the tally of votes to gain support in the inhabitants of Quasar. Whoever claimed the title would be able to purchase mana crystals from the visiting Hakima. Imperial law prohibits a title being legally restricting to a specific group of people, but it's crystal clear the freeborn who attend Anvil would be expected to ensure that they only ever elected a Hakima to the position. In addition to these benefits, the Parador would further solidify a certain importance of Quasar in Madruga and create a community of supportive Hakima who could help with the magical research if given the right facilities. Where the Parador stands, it could be upgraded into a full college of magic at any time at a cost of 55 wains of mithril and 55 wains of weirwood and 55 wains of white granite and 330 crowns. Upgrade would require a commission slot and could be authorized by anyone with the power to commission a college of magic. The Hakima would retain the ability to purchase mana crystals from the Parador, but gain the additional abilities to provided by a college of magic. If the Parador were upgraded, then the presence of so many Hakima in Quasar would provide crucial additional benefit. As long as the Hakima of Sand and Salt was seen to be a Hakima in good standing, then the total sessional upkeep of the Empire's College of Magic would be reduced by 20 thrones a season. Further reading. Struggles with the Sea. Spring 384, Winds of Fortune, presenting the evacuation opportunity. To curb those raging appetites, Winter 383, Wind of Fortune, laying out the options for Faraz that lead to the evacuation. Everything has a price, 383, Winds of Fortune, detailing potential agreements between the Empire and the Grendel. Roll of Honor details the characters who sent military units and fleets to help evacuate Faraz.